I watched her undress in front of him, his hand resting on her waist, fingers splayed with an ugly kind of ownership. My own lungs turned rigid, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I never thought I'd see my wife, my Clarissa, like that, with someone else's touch on her skin. But there I was, barely hidden behind the half-open bedroom door, heart thumping in my ears, mouth sour with the taste of betrayal. I should have shoved the door wide, should have roared. Instead, I froze, as if pinned by a slow, grinding force. The bed lamp cast a dim, honey-colored glow across the sheets, across her shoulders, across the man's lean, shadowed figure. Clarissa's hair was pulled up, exposing the pale line of her neck. She unhooked her bra with shaky fingers, while he, Theo, that social media showman, slid his palm down the small of her back, breathing words into her ear that I couldn't hear. Her lips parted in a soundless exhale. My chest burned. Every nerve in my body screamed to do something, but I felt paralyzed, as if any sudden move would tear a hole in my life I could never patch up. Yet that hole was already there. The illusions I'd clung to were in shreds. I remembered how, earlier that day, I had tried a weird little test. I brought Clarissa her favorite cream pastry even though I knew she actually hated sweets. It was twisted. Some part of me needed to confirm a suspicion that she'd lost all sincerity in how she looked at me. And she had. She forced a flimsy grin, touched my hand, murmured a thanks, but her gaze was miles away. Everything about that moment felt like a fake stage prop. Then, a day before, I discovered that note in my younger child's jacket, a half-crumpled paper from the preschool teacher, referencing a strange detail about how our kids had ended up in that group. Another man's name had popped up. A slip of the tongue from the teacher. I wanted to ask Clarissa, but I swallowed the question. Not out of fear, but out of a deep, choking dread that her answer might break me. And then came the final blow, this. I'd stumbled onto a stream, a broadcast by some braggart who boasted about other guys' chicks, like trophies. I watched in a daze. My gut turned inside out when he flipped the camera to reveal an image of Clarissa, a candid shot that was undeniably her, the curve of her cheek, the length of her hair. The chat exploded with whoops and taunts. My vision tunneled. I barely registered the rest of the stream, my mind fixated on that single photograph. Next thing I knew, I was kicking down the half-latched door of the room they used for streaming, spitting venom at the camera, while Clarissa sat at the edge of the frame. She'd looked at me like a stranger, half-lidded eyes, lips parted, so calm it was infuriating. She whispered, "You've changed," and I snapped right back, "You showed me what I needed to see." Then the chat watchers, hungry for drama, erupted with insults for him, for me, for her. Their fury was noise, a digital riot that hammered my eardrums, but it didn't matter. The real war was right here in my own home. And now, this. The memory of me bursting into that stream flickered in my mind as I stood, breath ragged, outside my own bedroom. Clarissa let her dress slide down her hips, that gentle swish of fabric making my temples throb. Theo's grin, cocky, triumphant, told me everything I needed to know. There was no confusion, no mistake to cling to. They both chose this. He leaned in, whispered something against her neck. She let out a quiet gasp. And that sound was too much. My voice tore free from my throat like a wounded animal's growl. "Get the hell off her," I spat, shoving the door fully open. The force of it banged against the stopper, and their heads jerked around in shock. Clarissa froze, half-naked, eyes blown wide. Theo scrambled upright, that cocky smirk wiped off his face. My entire body hummed with a violence I'd never felt. I wanted to break him, or break everything in sight. Clarissa gathered the dress from the floor, pressing it to her chest, stammering, "Rick. Don't say my name," I snapped. "Not like that." I glared at Theo, who looked like he might bolt for the window if I so much as advanced another step. He squared his shoulders, though. He was smaller than me, but in decent shape. Still, he was trembling. "Man, I can explain," he started, lifting a hand in some pitiful attempt at placation. I laughed, a harsh, raw sound. Explain. I saw your stream. You bragged. You showed her picture to your fans like some trophy. I could barely keep my voice steady. I gave everything to this family. Everything. Clarissa's eyes flickered, and in them, I read not shame, but an odd resignation. She whispered, "You wouldn't listen to me." I tried. "You tried nothing," I hissed back. "You let him put his hands on you. In our home. Our bed." Theo cleared his throat, panic creeping into his features. "Look, we didn't mean for it to go this far," he mumbled. "She's been lonely, you're never." I surged forward, fists clenched. He cowered, raising both arms. "Shut up," I growled. "Don't you dare pin this on me." Clarissa stepped between us, still clutching the dress to her front, cheeks flushed. "Stop, Rick. Hurting him fixes nothing." My eyes snapped to her. "Oh, and how is that my problem? I'm the one who's gotta fix the wreckage you two created." My voice was shaking, just like my hands. I had to dig my fingernails into my palm to keep from swinging a punch at Theo's jaw. She took a shallow breath. "I'm sorry." Her apology was a husk, with no weight behind it. Theo, pinned behind her, pressed his lips tight. I inhaled, exhaled, tried to stifle the urge to fling him against a wall. The tension in the room was choking. For a flicker of a second, I thought about our kids, both sleeping at my mother's place, ironically giving me a chance to confront Clarissa about the weird teacher's note. Now that seemed trivial compared to this hideous spectacle. I ground out, "Get your clothes on. Both of you." My voice was hoarse. "Then we talk." They did as I demanded, scurrying like guilty teenagers. Clarissa yanked a robe over her shoulders, hair a disheveled mess. Theo grabbed his t-shirt from the floor. I noticed the brand's logo, a streamer's phrase, "Let's go live." My stomach churned with pure loathing. A few moments later, we all ended up in the living room, an area that looked so deceptively cozy with its family photos and pastel curtains. I stood near the sofa, arms crossed to stop myself from lashing out. Clarissa perched on the armchair, eyes flicking from me to Theo. He hovered by the wall, half ready to dart. Outside, the night was quiet, as though no one in the world had any idea of the drama unfolding here. I forced a breath. "Explain it, Clarissa." "Everything." She swallowed, gaze darting to Theo for a split second before settling on me. "Remember how you started acting distant?" she said, voice shaky. "Working more hours, rarely talking. Then we lost ourselves. The kids, the routine, it took all our energy. I felt alone. My throat felt tight. So you jumped into bed with a two-bit showman?" I gestured angrily at Theo, who bristled but said nothing. Her shoulders slumped. "It wasn't like that," she tried, though we both knew that was a lie. "We began chatting online, texting. I didn't expect it to be so intense." He listened, "Rick. You barely looked at me." I barked a bitter laugh. "And this justifies you sleeping with him?" Tears glistened in her eyes, but they didn't fall. "No. But I can't make you understand the emptiness I felt. Or how the kids. I can't even say if they're truly." She stopped, as if catching herself from revealing some horrifying secret. I felt my insides twist. "Finish that sentence." She squeezed her eyes shut. "The teacher's note. You found it, didn't you?" My pulse hammered in my temples. "Yes. I want the truth." She licked her lips, throat bobbing in a hard swallow. "We'd been drifting for a while. Then, someone else came along. Not him," she waved at Theo, "but before. Brief, a mistake. I found out I was pregnant soon after. I told you you'd be a father again." You smiled so big, I didn't have the courage to say anything else. Theo stared at her, wide-eyed, because this was news to him as well. My mind reeled. My children, my precious kids, might not share my blood. My vision blurred, fury and heartbreak and confusion tangling in a vicious knot. Another man? I whispered. Not even him. Clarissa nodded numbly. It was one reckless night, okay? I regretted it the instant it happened. I clenched my jaw so tight it ached. And you let me raise them as if, no. That's not possible. I raked trembling fingers through my hair, recalling the teacher's note referencing some discrepancy in the paperwork. So they might be mine, or might not. She just stared at her knees. Theo cleared his throat. Hey, man, that's not on me, he muttered, as if wanting to dodge any blame for the kids. Rage shot through me. I should kill you both, I said, voice low and ragged. My fists tightened. But I won't. Because I'm not going to prison for either of you. This is my house, and I want you, I stabbed a finger at Theo, out. Now. He pressed his lips together, took a step toward the door, then hesitated. Clarissa, do you want me to? She shook her head, eyes glassy. Just, go. I watched him slip on his shoes, grab a jacket, and disappear outside with a hurried backward glance. The front door clicked shut, leaving me and Clarissa in a suffocating silence. We stared at each other. She looked drained, tears shining on her cheeks now. My entire body trembled with pent-up adrenaline. I forced a bitter laugh. You do realize what you did, right? You destroyed us. She pressed her lips together, a silent sob hitching in her chest. I know. I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to explode like this. I barked, but it did. And now what? I paced across the living room. My gaze landed on a photograph of us with the kids, smiling at a park. The memory curdled in my mind. I feel like I'm losing my mind, Clarissa. She sniffled, wiping at her eyes. I understand if you can't forgive me. Or if you want me gone. I'll do whatever you say. I whipped my head around. Don't put that on me. This is your mess to face. But you damn well better not take the kids away from me. I raised them. They're mine in every way that matters. The idea of losing them made me nauseous. She nodded, trembling. I'll never keep them from you. I wouldn't dare. The anger raged like a furnace inside. Yet some part of me recognized I needed to calm down, to think. Without another word, I grabbed my car keys from the side table. Clarissa sprang up, hugging her robe close. Where are you going? Out, I rasped. Need air. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but I stormed away, leaving her in the living room. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I stepped onto the porch. My hands still shook. I could picture them, Theo's hand on her waist, her breath hitching. The images fused into my brain, brandishing searing pain. I was a fool, and she had turned me into something ugly. The desire for revenge crackled in my veins. I drove aimlessly, streets blurring beneath the headlights. The city's neon signs flickered in the distance. Part of me wanted to find Theo, break his face for every smug grin he'd ever worn. But I kept going, kept driving, because I needed to breathe, to think, to keep from going ballistic. My phone buzzed with a text from Clarissa. I refused to look. Eventually, I pulled into a deserted parking lot behind a closed grocery store. The engine's hum faded when I switched it off. Silence swallowed me. And in that lonely quiet, the magnitude of what had happened crashed down. My wife had cheated, multiple times apparently, and the children might not be biologically mine. My chest heaved with a mix of betrayal, heartbreak, and a raw, savage desire to make them pay. Yet I was also pinned by a helpless ache. Because I still loved Clarissa. Or the version of her I thought I knew. My mind flickered to them. Did they even sleep together often in that bed, or was it new? Did she laugh with him the way she used to laugh with me? I sat there for a good hour, sinking into memories, regret, bitterness. Then I turned the key, headed for a cheap motel on the edge of town. The thought of going back home felt unbearable. Checking in was a blur. The front desk clerk sized me up, asked for ID, then handed me a key card. The room smelled stale, with a worn-out bedspread and a flickering lamp. But it was good enough for a man who needed to vanish from his own life for a night. I dropped onto the bed, shoes still on, and shut my eyes. Sleep came in fits, haunted by nightmares of Clarissa moaning Theo's name. Over and over, I jerked awake, fists clenched, sweat trickling down my back. Morning light found me half-curled on the mattress, phone in hand. I glanced at its screen, missed calls from Clarissa. Texts that went unanswered. One from my coworker, probably about a meeting. I scrolled, reading Clarissa's last message, "I know you're hurting. Please come back safe. We can talk. The kids need you. Talk." As if we hadn't done enough of that. I stifled a groan, grabbed a quick shower under the motel's pitiful water pressure, then changed into yesterday's clothes. My reflection in the mirror revealed dark circles under my eyes, a tension in my jaw that looked painful. I was 38, feeling more like 58 in that moment. I returned to the house, not sure what I'd find. Maybe Clarissa gone, or maybe the place torn apart. Instead, I walked into a too-quiet living room with curtains drawn. She was there, perched on the couch, hair unwashed, wearing sweatpants and a loose t-shirt. She gazed at me with raw anxiety. "You came back," she breathed. I wanted to retort with something cruel, but the words died in my throat. "I did," I said, stepping into the room. "Where's Theo? Where are the kids?" She answered softly, "Kids are still at your mom's. Theo is gone. I told him we're done, if we ever started anything real at all." She fidgeted with her hands. "I don't know what you want me to say." What could she say? I sank onto the armchair across from her. "I don't know either." The silence thickened. Then, in a flat tone, I pressed on, "Tell me about that other man who might be their father. Start at the beginning." Clarissa bowed her head, inhaling as though bracing for pain. Then the story spilled out, how I'd been away on a business trip years ago. She'd felt invisible, depressed. She met some guy through a friend's party, they had too much wine, ended up tangling in a huge mistake. She realized her cycle was off a while later, wasn't sure whose child she carried. By then, I was back, excited to expand our family. She said nothing, because it was easier to bury it. She cut ties with that man, never told him about her pregnancy. The kids arrived, healthy, and I loved them with all my heart. And she just prayed the lie would remain hidden forever. I listened in a grim hush. When she finished, my mouth tasted of ashes. "So I've been living in a fantasy, while you held this secret for years." She whispered, "It wasn't all fake, Rick. You love them, they love you. That's real, no matter biology." My hand clenched on the armchair. "But you lied. Over and over. Then you let that streamer jerk in your life, adding more filth. Why?" Her voice cracked. "I can't rationalize it. I was lonely, starved for attention, and he gave me a rush. I'm sorry. I messed up everything." I stared at her, feeling the swirl of anger and pity. She looked so small, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed in red. But part of me knew better than to show sympathy. "You messed up more than that," I said. "I can't just snap my fingers and forget." She gave a tiny nod, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "I'll move out if you want, but please don't punish the kids." I nearly roared. "Punish them? They're mine, even if someone else's DNA is in there. Don't you dare think I'd abandon them." Her gaze flicked to me in a mixture of relief and sorrow. She parted her lips, perhaps to speak, but no words emerged. I inhaled. I need to figure out how to handle this. You don't get to decide alone. Meanwhile, I've got some personal things to settle. Where's Theo's address? She blinked. Why? Because I have a few questions for him. My voice was an edge of steel. He bragged about you on that stream. He humiliated me in front of an entire audience. I won't let it go. Her eyes flared with worry. Rick, you're not. I'm not murdering him, if that's your fear. I'm done risking my freedom for scum like that. But I will talk to him. Now give me his address. She hesitated, then scribbled something on a slip of paper. I snatched it, barely nodding in thanks, and left. My chest felt like a furnace. The images of them in my bedroom wouldn't leave. I wanted to lash out, break something, watch him squirm. Because it was so painfully humiliating, imagining him boasting about how he'd nailed another man's wife. The father of that man's kids, if they were even mine. My entire identity was unraveling. I found his place easily, a mediocre apartment complex, chipped paint, weeds growing around the walkway. I hammered on the door, and footsteps approached. The lock clicked. Theo opened up, eyes going wide when he recognized me. Rick, didn't expect. I shoved the door, knocking him back a step. We talk. Now. He raised both hands. Hey man, I don't want trouble. My glare said otherwise. Too late. You plastered her image on your stream. You bragged about your conquests. Where do you get off, humiliating me like that? He stammered, I was drunk, or just showing off. People love drama, it helps with views, I didn't realize you'd see. I was a jerk. I'm sorry. Sorry, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of that word. You took advantage of her loneliness, used her for content. You smug piece of garbage. He tried to stand taller, but fear flickered in his eyes. Look, she came to me. I wasn't twisting her arm. If she wasn't happy with you, that's not my fault, right? I regret doing the stream bit, but the rest, she's an adult. My chest tightened. You playing the blame game with her? He swallowed. No. I just want you to know it wasn't only me. She wanted out. She said you changed, you never had time for her, never appreciated what she did with the kids, and... I lunged, seizing a handful of his shirt. His face paled. Shut up. Don't act like you know our problems. Don't ever speak about my kids. His hands trembled. All right, man, all right. Just, calm down. I let him go, shoved him back. He stumbled, almost tripping over a pile of clothes on the floor. The apartment reeked of stale pizza and energy drinks. A gaming rig glowed in the corner, monitors lit with some streaming software. He rubbed his chest where I'd grabbed him. You mention her name again on your pathetic channel, I said, and I'll ensure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life. Understood? He nodded quickly, panting. I got it. I promise, I won't. I'm done. She told me to stay away anyway. I scanned his sweaty face, the twitch of his lip. Good. I turned to leave, heart pounding with grim satisfaction. But halfway across the threshold, I paused, glancing over my shoulder. You ever think you can humiliate me again, or so much as text her, and I'll remind the world what a worthless coward you are. Clear. Crystal, he whispered, eyes on the floor. I left, slamming the door behind me. My breath came in tight gasps. Part of me longed for something more physically violent, but I'd told myself I wouldn't risk jail for this scumbag. I'd found a small measure of vengeance in his trembling fear. The next days were a blur. My mother dropped the kids home. Clarissa tried to explain that I was away for business, but they sensed the tension. I tried not to let my anger spill over around them, though the older one, my daughter, asked why mommy was crying so much. It tore at me. I held her tight, wanting to promise everything would be fine, but the words stuck. In the evenings, Clarissa and I avoided each other, minimal conversation, no direct eye contact. She stayed in the guest room. Meanwhile, the note from the teacher hovered in my mind, the knowledge that one or both kids might belong to some man I'd never met. It felt like a bomb ticking away inside my chest. 3 nights later, after the children fell asleep, I found Clarissa in the kitchen, leaning against the sink. Her face looked gaunt in the overhead light. "We need to talk about the kids," I said flatly. She nodded, voice near a whisper. I proposed a paternity test. A wave of dread crossed her features, but she agreed. So I booked an appointment, something discreet. We told each other we wouldn't mention it to the children yet. They were too young to grasp the implications. Meanwhile, we tiptoed around the house, half living in separate spheres. On the day of the test, we drove in tense silence, left the kids with a family friend, got swabbed at a small clinic. The nurse was polite but detached, telling us results would come in about a week. The entire time, my stomach twisted. Clarissa, pale as a ghost, clutched her purse with white knuckles, as though bracing for a death sentence. Afterward, in the car, she murmured, "I know you hate me right now. But if it turns out they're not biologically yours, please don't cut them out. They adore you." I exhaled. "They're mine. I'll always be in their lives." My gaze flicked to her. "You, on the other hand, there's a limit to how many knives in the back I can take." She closed her eyes, tears sliding free. Understood. That night, I tried sleeping in my own bed, but the memory of her and Theo invaded every corner. I ended up on the living room couch, half buried under blankets, mind racing with unspent rage. Thoughts of revenge returned, coiling around me like a python. I wanted to see Clarissa suffer as I had suffered. But then I'd imagine the kids, how they needed some sense of stability. The push-pull tore at me constantly. While waiting for the test results, I forced myself to function. Went to work, pretended normalcy. Inside, I was roiling. Co-workers asked if I was sick, I brushed them off. In truth, my entire soul felt sick, but I wasn't about to spill that story at the water cooler. The day the envelope arrived, Clarissa brought it in, face ashen. We sat at the kitchen table. She set it down between us. We stared at it for a long moment. My heart hammered. Then I tore it open. Scanned the lines. The first child, 99.9% chance I'm the father. Relief speared through my chest. The second child, the same, 99.9%. My relief slammed into me so hard I almost laughed. They were both mine. All the fear and bitterness about some unknown father shrank to ashes in that instant. Clarissa let out a gasp. "They're yours," she whispered. Tears brimmed again, though these looked almost grateful. She seemed about to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. Yes, the kids were mine, but that didn't erase the affairs. I exhaled in a rush. All right, so they're safe from that question. My voice wobbled with 1,000 unsaid emotions. Now we deal with the rest. She bowed her head. I know. I want to do better, but I realize it's probably too late. I rose, pushing the chair back. I'm not sure if I'll ever forgive this. The memory of her sliding that dress off for Theo stung like a brand on my heart. I sure as hell can't let you walk away unscathed. Her shoulders trembled. She looked up with watery eyes. You can take everything. I'll move out. Whatever punishment you think I deserve. I only beg you to let me see the kids, share custody. Stop, I snapped. Don't talk like that. The kids need a mother. And I'm not a monster. But you can't keep living here as if it's all normal. Not after that. Not after he touched you. My throat felt raw. I can't look at you without wanting to tear something apart. She made a small, wounded sound. I understand. So you want me gone? I paused, glaring at the floor. I pictured her rummaging for an apartment, kids bouncing back and forth, messy legal battles. The thought of giving her a pass to slip away unpunished curdled my stomach. Yet the alternative, pretending to fix a shattered marriage, felt impossible. My rage demanded retribution. But what would that look like? After a tense minute, I said, I don't know. Let me think. Then I turned and walked out, leaving her in the kitchen with the test results. The sense of triumph I'd expected at learning the kids were mine never arrived. Instead, I just felt hollow, a swirl of half-formed plans for vengeance crawling through my mind. Over the next few weeks, we coexisted in uneasy truce. The children, clueless, got used to the idea that Daddy slept on the couch because he worked late. Clarissa tiptoed around, cooking meals, cleaning, occasionally trying to start conversation. I answered in monosyllables or not at all. She sank into a quiet despair, rarely leaving the house except for groceries or dropping the kids at preschool. Meanwhile, I obsessed over ways to settle the score. My pride demanded something dramatic, a scathing public humiliation, maybe. Because if you let your wife's lover humiliate you once, the world sees you as weak. I wanted to correct that narrative, especially for the men in my demographic who'd watch stories like this on some online platform. I needed closure that was big enough, final enough, to snuff out the pain. Late one night, I sat in the living room, staring at the TV's reflection in dark glass. Clarissa had gone to bed. The kids were asleep. My phone glowed on the coffee table. I found myself searching Theo's stream account. A new broadcast was scheduled soon, some nonsense about living large in the city. I frowned. The man was unstoppable, apparently. So he'd just prance around, building his brand, and nobody would know what a snake he was. An idea formed, savage and cold. I could ruin him. If I somehow forced him to reveal his wrongdoing, or if I hijacked his stream, turned his audience against him. Let them see how he preyed on a married woman, flaunted it. Let them tear him to pieces in the chat. That would be a start. Yet my chest still burned for more direct confrontation. Maybe I needed to use a bigger stage, a place he couldn't hide. I spent the next few days quietly investigating. Found out from a mutual acquaintance that Theo had a major live event coming up, some small influencer convention. He planned to appear, host a panel, sign merch for fans. My lips curled in a grim smile. Perfect. On the day of the event, I lied to Clarissa about going to a friend's place. She hardly asked questions anymore, too worn out to push. I left the kids with my mom, then drove to the convention center, a modest building with banners, sponsor booths, bright overhead lights. I paid the entry fee, slipped inside. My heartbeat drummed with anticipation. Streams of fans roamed the corridors, many wearing t-shirts with various content creators' logos. In one large room, chairs were arranged before a stage. Theo's face was on a promotional poster, promising a Q&A about building your brand. I found a seat near the front, ball cap pulled low. After some filler talk from the organizer, Theo strolled on stage to modest applause. He wore jeans, a flashy jacket, that same smug grin. He started speaking about his success, how he'd collabed with popular channels, soared in popularity, blah, blah. The memory of him bragging about Clarissa flared in my mind. My fists tightened on my knees. I waited, breathing slow, until they opened the floor to questions. I stood, heart pounding, and found the microphone set up in the aisle. Theo recognized me instantly, face blanching. The crowd murmured, uncertain what was happening. In a measured tone that shook only a little, I said, "Hey, got a question for you." Did you ever brag on your stream about sleeping with a married woman? Post her picture for everyone to see. A hush fell. Theo's eyes darted from me to the panel host, then back. "Excuse me," he said, trying to force a laugh. The audience shifted, sensing drama. I pressed on, voice rising. "You heard me. You told your viewers you were hooking up with someone else's chick. Showed them photos of my wife. Did that boost your subscriber count?" Gasps scattered across the room. People craned their necks, phones whipped out to record. Theo's cheeks flamed. He stammered, "It was a stupid, private joke, man." "Private? You streamed it publicly to hundreds, maybe thousands." My tone sharpened with fury I no longer cared to hide. "Let them see your real face." He tried to wave it off. "Look, buddy," I apologized. "Let's not do this here." I barked a bitter laugh. "Why not? You had no issue humiliating me, humiliating my wife, for internet clout. So let your fans witness the truth. You're a coward who sneaks into married women's beds." He snapped, "Dude, you think this is all my fault? She came on to me. You. Don't you dare." My voice thundered through the small auditorium. Security guards were edging closer, uncertain. Spectators muttered in shock or excitement. Cameras rolled. I felt a savage thrill. He had nowhere to hide. Take responsibility for your part. And remember this, if you ever try to spin that story again, I'll show the world exactly what you said and did. I've got the recordings. He looked ready to either charge me or faint. The host tried to intervene, muttering something about time constraints. I dropped the mic, turned, and strode out, ignoring the swirl of stunned chatter. Outside, the crisp air washed over me. Adrenaline roared in my veins. That moment, humiliating him in front of his fans, felt like a victory. But did it soothe my pain about Clarissa's betrayal? Not fully. Yet I felt a measure of justice, a public blow to his pride that mirrored the blow he'd dealt me. When I finally got home, Clarissa sat in the living room, shoulders tense. She asked quietly where I'd been. I told her, in blunt detail, how I crashed Theo's event. Her eyes widened with fear. "Rick, oh my God. He can't retaliate, can he?" I shrugged. "He can try. He'll regret it. Let's see how many sponsors want to work with a streamer who humiliates married women for clicks." She said nothing for a moment, then let out a shaky exhale. "You really wanted to ruin him." I sank onto the couch, the same couch I'd been sleeping on. "He ruined me first, or tried to." "My turn." I paused, glancing at her. "What about you, Clarissa? If you want out, maybe it's time to go. I can't keep living like this." She looked away, tears brimming. "I'll do what you say. If you want me to leave, I will. But I'm still hoping, maybe one day, you can forgive me enough to stay and the kids lives together." Her voice was a trembling hush. "I love them. And, some part of me still loves you." I closed my eyes. The old ache flared, reminding me of the nights we'd laughed in this room, or how I'd see her in that pink robe, hair messy, leaning on my shoulder. But that was before she let a stranger's hands wander her body. "I can't forget the image of you undressing for him," I said, voice hollow. "Might take a lifetime to bury that." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I know." Weeks passed. The tension never fully eased, but with time, the raw fury shifted into a dull acceptance. I filed for separation, though we kept it informal for the sake of the kids. She agreed to remain in the house for now, living like a roommate, while we sorted financial details. The kids deserved stability while we worked out how to handle the future. And despite everything, I wanted them to have their mother close. Late at night, I'd watch them sleep, hearts beating in sync with mine. They were truly my own. She tried to atone in small ways, preparing my coffee exactly how I liked, quietly doing extra errands, giving me space. She never asked for affection. Now and then, I caught her looking at me with yearning, as if wishing I'd say, "I forgive you." But I couldn't, not yet. I carried the memory of that night in a locked vault inside me. One evening, I was at the local diner, trying to clear my head. My phone lit up with an unknown number. I answered, only to hear Theo's voice, subdued, asking me to meet up. My gut clenched. Against my better judgment, I said yes, but in a public place. We met in a corner booth of that same diner. He looked ragged, hair messy, eyes shadowed. He said quietly, "Your stunt at the convention, it worked. Sponsors dropped me. My channel took a hit. Hate messages poured in. My subscriber count is half what it was." I sipped my coffee, calm. "Good. You had that coming." He nodded, tapping anxious fingers on the table. "I guess I wanted to say, you got your revenge. I deserve it. But I'm leaving town soon. Thought you should know. There's nothing left for me here." I shrugged. "Fine by me. Just stay away from Clarissa." He gave a bitter smile. "She blocked me. I have no illusions. You can go ahead and celebrate. You won." I studied him, once so smug, now hollowed out. A pang of twisted satisfaction mingled with a quiet sense of closure. "It was never about winning," I said. "It was about making sure you understood there's a price." He swallowed. "Yeah. Message received." He slid out of the booth and left without another word, shoulders slumped. I watched him walk out into the neon-lit darkness, a man who had lost the shiny stage he craved. Driving home, I felt a complex swirl of triumph and emptiness. I'd gotten my revenge, but my marriage was still a jagged wound. Clarissa and I coexisted in a house that reeked of betrayal. The path ahead remained uncertain, but at least I'd brought that arrogant jerk to his knees. A few nights later, Clarissa approached me after the kids were asleep. I was sitting in the backyard, stars overhead, a half-finished beer in my hand. She stepped out quietly, arms folded against the cool air. I glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah." She hesitated, then eased into a lawn chair beside me. "I just want to say I appreciate that you're still here. Even after everything." I took a swig of the beer. "I'm here because of the kids." She gave a trembling nod. "I know." Silence stretched. Then she spoke again, voice cracking, "I know I have no right to ask, but if there's ever a chance to rebuild, maybe with therapy, with time, I'd give anything to try. Because I can't picture my life without you, or the children all under one roof." I stared at the sky, a swirl of half-formed emotions filling my chest. "Do I trust you not to do it again?" She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "I can't blame you if the answer is no. But I swear, I'm done chasing empty thrills. It was a mistake. I see that now." I let the silence speak for a while. Then I murmured, "You lied about the kids, about your affair. Then you started up with that clown. It's not a small thing to forgive. I need time. And if I can't get there, we'll finalize the separation. Understand?" She nodded, tears on her cheeks. "Yes. I understand." I exhaled, mind flicking through old memories of us dancing at our wedding reception, her in a simple white dress. The flicker of her smile back then made me feel I could conquer anything. Where did that version of us go? Maybe it died under the weight of neglected intimacy, regrets, or each other's flaws. We were older now, battered by mistakes. Part of me wanted to let go and walk away for good, but the kids anchored me here, and so did a lingering spark of hope that maybe, if I hammered away at the rubble, I could find a piece of the love that once existed. She whispered, "Thank you for letting me try, at least." I didn't reply. We just sat there, side by side under the silent stars. Eventually, we drifted inside. I resumed my usual post on the couch. She went upstairs. But the next morning, she placed a mug of coffee by my side, gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze, then said, "I'm sorry, Rick." Her voice trembled with sincerity. I didn't respond, but I didn't shrug off her hand either. The kids came bounding in, full of energy, demanding cartoons. Life marched on in messy rhythms, and I followed, unsure if my heart could ever fully mend. In the weeks that followed, I witnessed Theo's online presence dwindling to near nothing. Comments from former fans turned hostile. He reaped the consequences of humiliating a married woman in front of that hungry audience. Meanwhile, Clarissa walked a fine line, cooking, cleaning, working part-time from home, never stepping beyond the boundary I set, trying to earn back a scrap of trust. One evening, I found her crying softly over the laundry, hugging a small shirt that belonged to one of our kids. She looked up, eyes red, whispering, "I ruined everything we built." I stared at her for a long moment. The old anger sparked, but it flickered out quickly, replaced by exhaustion. I stepped forward, rested a hand on her shoulder. She stared at me in surprise, tears glistening. "I'm not sure how to fix it," I admitted quietly. "But I won't run from the attempt." Her gaze shone with gratitude. She reached up, curling trembling fingers over mine. "Even that is more than I deserve." We didn't embrace. We didn't make any grand declarations. We simply stood there in the laundry room, two damaged people uncertain if we could salvage a marriage. But we were willing to try, for the kids, and maybe for ourselves. Because somehow, I refused to be destroyed, to remain a victim of her betrayal. I wanted to become stronger, more self-aware, if that was even possible. Days turned to months. I never forgot the moment I caught her undressing for another man. That memory still stabbed me in quiet moments. But each day, I found a small piece of me able to push forward, forging a new identity, one shaped by pain yet tempered by survival. Clarissa, for her part, respected every boundary. She accepted my outbursts, apologized each time. When I felt the burning need to lash out, I tried to contain it, to release it in the gym or on a solitary drive. Slowly, a shaky pattern of co-parenting and shared household tasks emerged, not quite love, not quite separation. Maybe one day, I'd decide to banish her from my life. Or maybe we'd forge a second chance, forging steel from what was once shattered. But for now, the best I could do was stand upright, eyes open, scars visible, and face each new sunrise. I was changed forever. And though Clarissa's betrayal nearly broke me, I refused to let it define me as a ruined man. If there was any truth in that old saying about adversity forging strength, then I would cling to that truth, breathe it, make it my shield. I had been wrecked, humiliated, forced to question my children's parentage, my own worth as a husband. Yet I discovered I was not so easily erased. I exacted my revenge on the man who flaunted my wife. I held the line for my kids, proving that fatherhood transcends blood. And in the end, the shreds of my pain began knitting together into a hardened sense of self. The heartbreak still stung, but the rawness receded, replaced by an understanding that survival was possible. I had stared the darkest betrayal in the face, and here I was, battered but standing. Some nights, I lay awake on the couch, the lamp off, hearing the faint hush of Clarissa's footsteps above. Memories haunted me, the pastry test, the note from the preschool teacher, the online stream, the foreign hand on her waist. Each image flayed me open anew. But I'd clench my fists and vow not to be undone. I'd think of the kids' laughter, their small arms hugging me tight. They were mine, my flesh, my responsibility. That knowledge was enough to keep me grounded, forging ahead day by day. I never apologized for the vengeance I unleashed on Theo, never regretted that moment I confronted him publicly. Some might call it excessive, but it felt right, it felt necessary, a direct line from my battered pride to retribution. And though Clarissa bore the brunt of my coldness at home, I recognized that, in her own way, she was equally shattered, living under a cloud of remorse, uncertain if I'd ever offer forgiveness. Still, as time carried us forward, I noticed small gestures. She'd slip a comforting hand on my arm when I was tense, or I'd find her sitting by the kids at night, tears in her eyes as she watched them sleep. Maybe we both knew that we'd never return to who we were. Maybe that was okay. Because I was done with illusions. I was forging a new self from the wreckage. In the final hush of each night, the old rage would flare, but I'd tamp it down. I'd remember the day we got the paternity test results, the relief that they were undeniably mine, and how that overshadowed everything else for one precious moment. I'd hold on to that, the truth that no matter what else she did, no matter how she betrayed me, I was a father to those kids, and no one could strip that from me. That knowledge was power, an anchor in the storm. And eventually, it would grant me the strength to decide whether I could truly forgive, or whether I'd walk away once the children were older. The ending wasn't written yet. But I was no longer a broken man cowering in the hallway, watching his wife expose herself to another. I was alive, wide awake, and though scarred, I was still whole enough to stand and fight. No matter how many times I recalled the moment when she undressed in front of him, I recognized that scene no longer shattered me the same way. The cracks were there, yes, but I'd learned to live with them. She showed me the worst, and I survived. There was a quiet power in that realization. The last piece of me that needed healing would take time, but I was no longer drowning. I'd crawled ashore, battered and changed, but not defeated. My life was mine, and I would shape it with or without her. That final acceptance washed over me like a breath of night air, reminding me that though I'd been burned, I was still capable of forging something new from the ashes. I was Rick Holt, father, betrayed husband, flawed man. Yet I stood on my own 2 feet, no longer on the outside of my own life. And I'd never again let another's hand rest on her waist without a fight.